Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So before you get cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. The map said the road ended at mile 41. It didn't. At 2:17 a.m., the GPS recalculated for the third time and then went silent. Not frozen, not malfunctioning. Silent. The blue route line vanished as if it had never existed. Evan Mercer lifted his foot off the accelerator, heart tightening as his headlights cut through fog thick enough to feel solid. Pines crowded the road on both sides, their branches leaning inward like they were listening. "That's not possible," he muttered. He had checked the route twice before leaving the city. There was no alternate road, no service road, no continuation past mile 41. Yet asphalt stretched ahead of him, smooth, freshly painted, reflecting his headlights with a dull, oily sheen. Evan slowed to a crawl. The radio crackled, then cleared, then crackled again. A voice came through, calm and distorted, as if spoken through water. "You shouldn't be here this late." Evan slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly before stopping dead in the middle of the road. "Hello," he said, gripping the wheel. "Is this some kind of emergency broadcast?" No response. Only static. And beneath it, something else. A low rhythmic sound. Like breathing. The road that wasn't there. Evan was a surveyor. Cartography. Infrastructure verification. The boring end of civil engineering that only mattered when something went wrong. Tonight, something was very wrong. 3 hours earlier, he'd been called by the state planning office about a discrepancy in historical road records. An access route appeared in tax maps, but not in satellite imagery. The automated system flagged it as an error. Except the error went back 72 years. Same coordinates. Same designation. County Route G17. No construction permits. No decommissioning records. No accidents logged. It was as if the road existed on paper only. Evan had volunteered to verify it in person. Easy overtime. Quick drive. Snap photos. Confirm nothing was there. But now, he stepped out of the car. The air was colder than it should have been for early fall. Damp. Still. His footsteps sounded wrong on the asphalt, too soft, like the road absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. He shined his flashlight down at the painted center line. The paint was new. Still sharp at the edges. Still faintly reflective. Someone maintained this road. Mile marker 42. A metal sign emerged from the fog ahead. Evan's breath caught. Mile 42. "That's impossible," he whispered. He walked closer. The sign was bolted into the ground, slightly rusted at the edges, as if it had been there a long time. Beneath the number was a smaller line of text, barely visible under grime. "You are not lost." Evan staggered back. That wasn't a standard road marker. That was a message. The first house. He didn't remember driving past any intersections. Yet suddenly there it was. A house stood just off the road to the right. 2 stories, dark windows, porch light glowing faintly yellow. A mailbox leaned forward near the shoulder. No driveway. No tire tracks. Just the house, as if the road had been built for it. The mailbox creaked as Evan passed. The name painted on the side was nearly worn away. Only one word remained legible. Holloway. Evan froze. His stomach dropped with recognition. Holloway, he murmured. That name had appeared in the archive earlier that night, buried deep in scanned microfilm records tied to decommissioned land purchases. Always the same note. Property owner unavailable for comment. For 70 years. The phone that couldn't connect. Evan pulled out his phone. No signal. No emergency call. Not even a spinning icon. The screen simply displayed the time. 2:29 a.m. It hadn't changed since he stopped the car. He tried recording video. The camera app opened, but showed nothing but static. As if the lens couldn't see this place. The knock. He didn't know why he walked up the porch steps. Every instinct screamed not to. But something else pulled him forward, not force, not fear. Curiosity sharpened into obligation. The porch boards didn't creak. They waited. Evan raised his hand and knocked once. The door opened immediately. No hesitation. No sound. A woman stood inside. Late 40s, maybe older. Her face was pale, lined, not with age, but with something heavier. Her eyes were sharp and tired, like someone who hadn't slept in years. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly. "You already told me that," Evan replied, then stopped. I heard you on the radio." She nodded once. "That means it started again." The room with no windows. She led him inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and antiseptic. The house was lit, but there were no visible light sources. No lamps. No fixtures. Just ambient glow. Evan glanced toward where windows should have been. Blank walls. Smooth. Unbroken. "Where am I?" he asked. The woman closed the door behind them. "You're on Route G17, she said. "The part that doesn't like being found." The book on the table. She gestured to a dining table at the center of the room. A large ledger sat open on it. Thick pages. Handwritten entries. Names. Dates. Times. The most recent entry was dated today. Time 2:17 a.m. Name, Evan Mercer. His breath hitched. "I didn't sign that." She met his eyes. "No," she said softly. "But you arrived. The rules." She slid the ledger toward him. "You have until sunrise," she continued. "After that, the road decides whether you're real enough to leave." Evan laughed weakly. "This isn't funny." "I know," she replied. "I used to laugh too." "Used to?" She hesitated, then said, "Before I stayed." The sound under the house. A vibration passed through the floor. Subtle. Slow. Like something turning over in its sleep. Evan felt it through his shoes, up his legs, into his chest. "What was that?" he whispered. The woman didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was careful. "That's why the road exists," she said, "and why people disappear on it." The first name he recognized. Evan scanned the ledger again. Names blurred together, dozens, maybe hundreds. Then one stood out. Daniel Mercer. Date, 1998. Time, 1:54 a.m. Evan's blood ran cold. "My father," he said. The woman closed her eyes. "I was wondering when they'd send family again." The woman did not apologize for what Evan had just learned. She had the expression of someone who had delivered the weather, unchangeable, impersonal, already moving past it. "My father disappeared in 1998, Evan said, his voice unsteady. "There was an investigation. Search parties. They said his car was found burned out near a quarry." The woman nodded slowly. "They usually find something," she said. "The road prefers not to look careless." Evan clenched his jaw. "You're saying he was here?" "I'm saying his name is written," she replied. "And the book doesn't lie. The ledger's weight." Evan lifted the ledger with shaking hands. It was heavier than it looked, the pages thick with ink pressed deep into the fibers, as if every name had been written slowly, deliberately. The entries followed a pattern. Name, date, time, status. Most of the statuses were the same. Returned. Did not return. There were no explanations. No causes. No notes. Just outcomes. Evan flipped backward, scanning decades of names. Some entries were neat and formal. Others were frantic, the handwriting jagged, as if the person writing had been rushed or afraid. "How many people live here?" Evan asked. The woman watched him carefully. "Just me," she said. "Now, her name." "Who are you?" Evan asked. She hesitated for the first time. "Margaret Holloway." The name landed heavily in his chest. "Holloway," he repeated. "Like the mailbox." She nodded. "My family has been here since the road learned how to stay." "That doesn't make sense." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. The ones who stay." Margaret poured water from a glass pitcher into 2 cups. Evan noticed her hands were steady, unnaturally so. "You said my father was here," he said. "Did he stay?" Margaret took a slow breath. "Some people leave," she said. "Some people are allowed to leave. And some people become useful." Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Useful to what?" "The road," she said simply. "The first story." Margaret gestured for Evan to sit. "When Route G17 was first drawn on maps, it was supposed to connect 3 towns," she began. But construction crews kept reporting delays. Equipment failures. Men quitting without explanation. She paused. Then they started disappearing. Evan swallowed. "The state buried it," she continued. "Officially, the road was never completed. but on paper, it was too expensive to erase. So it stayed, a mistake that kept getting funded. And people kept driving into it, Evan said. Margaret nodded. Especially people who were tired, lost, carrying something heavy. The road's taste. What do you mean by heavy? Evan asked. Margaret's gaze sharpened. Grief, she said. Guilt. Regret. The kind of thoughts that don't stop talking when you're alone at night. Evan thought of his father, quiet, withdrawn in his last years, haunted by something he never explained. He was driving late, Evan whispered. He told my mom he needed to clear his head. Margaret's expression softened. That's how the road hears you, she said. Not with ears, with intention. The ones who returned. Evan flipped the ledger forward again. Some names were marked returned, but there was something else beside them, a small symbol, repeated over and over. A triangle bisected by a line. What's that? Evan asked. Margaret leaned in. Those are the ones who came back wrong. The man who couldn't stop driving. Margaret turned a few pages back and tapped one entry. Samuel Pike returned. He was a truck driver, she said. Missed an exit. Ended up here. What happened to him? He left at sunrise, Margaret replied, smiling. Polite. Thanked me for the coffee. And then, he drove for 3 days straight, she said quietly. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just kept going until he drove into a concrete barrier at 70 miles an hour. Evan stared at her. The doctor said exhaustion, she continued. But his wife told me he kept saying the same thing before he died. What? Evan asked. Margaret swallowed. If I stop, it will find me again. The rule of sunrise. You said I have until sunrise, Evan said. What happens then? Margaret looked toward the blank wall where a window should have been. At sunrise, she said, the road decides. Decides what? Whether you belong to the map, she replied, or to the margin. The sound returns. The vibration beneath the floor returned, stronger this time. A deep, rolling pressure like something massive shifting underground. Evan stood abruptly. What is that? Margaret remained seated. That, she said, is why no one lives here anymore. The family business. My grandparents thought it was a blessing, Margaret continued. A road that brought people to them. They ran a diner here once. Before the house. A diner? Evan repeated. Yes. Drivers would stop, eat, talk. Some would calm down and leave. Some would stay too long. And your family? Evan asked. Margaret's lips tightened. We learned how to listen, she said, and how to keep records. The night Margaret stayed. Evan hesitated. Why are you still here? Margaret's eyes flicked to the ledger. My husband drove in one night, she said. Drunk. Angry. Said he was done with everything. Evan waited. I got him to sleep, she continued. I thought that would be enough. Her voice wavered. But the road doesn't care about love. It cares about weight. The empty rooms. Margaret led Evan through the house. Each room felt larger than it should have been, longer, deeper, subtly distorted. No windows. No mirrors. Why no mirrors? Evan asked. Margaret stopped walking. Because people who see themselves too clearly don't leave, she said. The door that is never used. At the end of the hall was a locked door, thicker than the others. The wood was scarred, as if something had struck it repeatedly from the inside. What's in there? Evan asked. Margaret did not answer. Instead, she said, Your father tried to open it. The name again. Evan's chest tightened. What happened to him? He asked. Margaret finally met his eyes. He chose, she said. Chose what? To stay, she replied. So you wouldn't have to. The lie Evan had lived with. Evan staggered back, gripping the wall. All these years, he whispered. We thought he left us. Margaret shook her head gently. No, she said. He kept you out. The road learns. The house creaked softly, not old wood, but something adjusting. Margaret stiffened. It knows you've read the book, she said. What does that mean? It means, she replied, you're not just passing through anymore. The clock that moved. Evan glanced at his phone. The time had changed. 2:43 a.m. Time's moving again, he said. Margaret exhaled slowly. That's not a good sign. The question no one asks. Is there a way to destroy the road? Evan asked. Margaret looked almost amused. You don't destroy something that only exists when people need it, she said. You replace it. Replace it with what? She paused. Truth, she said, which is much harder to build. The first choice. Margaret slid the ledger toward Evan. If you want to leave, she said, you don't just walk out at sunrise. What do I do? You write, she replied. Evan stared at the blank line beneath his name. What am I supposed to write? Margaret's voice dropped. Why you're really here. The pen was heavier than it should have been. Evan felt at the moment he picked it up, an unnatural resistance, as if the air itself thickened around his hand. The ledger lay open before him, its pages faintly warm, the paper textured like skin that had been handled too often. Margaret stood across the table, arms folded, watching him the way a nurse watches a patient about to hear bad news. What happens if I don't write? Evan asked. Margaret didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached over and turned several pages ahead. Evan's breath caught. Page after page of blank lines. Names written at the top. No explanation beneath them. What are those? He asked. Margaret's voice was quiet. The ones who refused. The cost of silence. Evan traced one of the names with his finger. The ink was faded, as if it had been written a long time ago, then slowly erased by the page itself. What happened to them? He asked. Margaret closed the book gently. The road keeps what it doesn't understand, she said. If you don't tell it who you are, it decides for you. That's insane. Yes, she replied calmly. But it's consistent. The first confession. Evan looked down at the empty line beneath his name. Why you're really here. I came because of a map error, he said. That's the truth. Margaret shook her head. That's why you were sent, she said. Not why you came. Evan swallowed. The vibration beneath the floor returned, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat sinking to his own. I didn't want to go home, he said finally. Margaret didn't interrupt. My wife and I, he exhaled sharply. We've been circling the same fight for years. Kids. Or no kids. Every time it comes up, I shut down. The pen trembled in his fingers. My father disappeared because he couldn't face his family anymore, Evan continued. And I promised myself I wouldn't be like him. Margaret's eyes softened. But you are, she said gently. Evan's jaw tightened. I'm afraid, he whispered. Afraid that if I stay, I'll ruin everything. And if I leave. The pen pressed into the page. He began to write. The ink that sinks. The words did not sit on the surface of the paper. They sank. Each sentence darkened as if absorbed, the ink spreading slightly, pulsing faintly before settling. Evan felt lighter with every line, exposed but unburdened. The vibration beneath the house eased. Margaret exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. It's listening, she said. The room changes. The walls shifted. Not visibly, but Evan felt it, like a pressure change before a storm breaks. A faint sound drifted through the house. Voices. Not words. Emotion. Grief. Regret. Rage. Love. Thousands of confessions layered over one another. Evan staggered back from the table. What is that? He whispered. Margaret closed her eyes. That's what the road does with the truth, she said. It stores it. The purpose of the road. Why? Evan asked. Why collect confessions? Margaret opened her eyes. Because unspoken truth corrodes, she said. It seeps into places it shouldn't. The road learned to trap it, like a drainage system for human pain. That's not helping, Evan said hoarsely. That's hoarding. Margaret nodded. Yes. The men who built it. She led Evan into another room. Unlike the others, this one held objects. Maps. Old surveying equipment. Blueprints yellowed with age. On one wall hung photographs. Men in work clothes. Engineers. Officials. All standing in front of half-finished roadways. They knew, Evan said quietly. They knew something was wrong, Margaret replied. And instead of stopping, they redesigned around it. She pointed to a blueprint. Route G17 curved subtly, unnaturally, like it was avoiding something underground. They didn't build the road, she said. They contained it, the first keeper. Margaret gestured to a faded photograph of a young woman standing beside a ledger identical to the one on the table. That was my great-grandmother, she said. The first one who stayed on purpose. Why would anyone do that? Evan asked. Margaret's voice was barely audible. Because if no one listens, she said, The road goes looking. The night Evan's father arrived. Evan hesitated. What happened the night my father came here? Margaret closed her eyes. He arrived angry, she said. At himself. At the world. At you. Evan flinched. He blamed himself for teaching you to disappear into work, she continued. For never saying what scared him. Tears burned Evan's eyes. He stayed up all night writing, Margaret said. Page after page. And then? Evan asked. At sunrise he had a choice, she said. The door. Margaret led him back down the hall to the scarred door. She placed her hand on the wood. This is where the ones who stay go, she said. Not physically. Not forever. The door vibrated faintly under her palm. They become part of the listening, she said. Anchors. Evan's stomach twisted. He chose that, he whispered. Margaret nodded. So you wouldn't have to, she repeated. The truth Evan didn't want. Then why am I here? Evan demanded. If he already paid the price? Margaret looked at him steadily. Because the road doesn't believe in inheritance, she said. Only patterns. The confession that wasn't his. Evan flipped through the ledger again. He stopped at his father's entry. The page was warped. The ink bled deep into the paper. Beneath the name was a single line Margaret hadn't shown him before. Status, partial return. What does that mean? Evan asked. Margaret's face went pale. It means, she said slowly, part of him never stopped listening. The whisper. Evan felt it then. A presence. Not hostile. Familiar. A pressure behind his eyes, like a memory trying to surface. Dad, he whispered. The vibration beneath the house surged, then stilled. Margaret grabbed Evan's arm. Don't, she said sharply. If you answer, it counts as consent. The road tests him. The house lights dimmed. The air thickened. The ledger pages fluttered rapidly, stopping on a blank page. A new line etched itself faintly into the paper. Not ink. An indentation. What will you leave behind? Evan's heart pounded. I already wrote, he said. Margaret shook her head. That was admission, she said. This is exchange. The rule no one tells. What does it want? Evan asked. Margaret's voice cracked. It wants you to choose, she said, between being remembered or being finished. The trap. Evan realized then what the road truly was. Not a monster. Not a god. A mechanism. It fed on unresolved human weight, and it offered relief in exchange for presence. Stay, and the burden ends. Leave, and the burden returns, lighter but still yours. The sound of sunrise coming. Somewhere deep beneath the house, something shifted. Not stirred. Prepared. Margaret glanced toward the ceiling. Sunrise is closer than it should be, she whispered. It knows you're hesitating. The choice forming. Evan closed the ledger. No, he said. Margaret looked at him sharply. No, she repeated. I won't become an anchor, he said. And I won't pretend the weight is gone if I leave. The house creaked. Angrily this time. You can't outstubborn a road built on avoidance, Margaret said urgently. Evan met her gaze. Then I'll do what no one else did, he said. I'll leave and tell people exactly what's here. The first crack. The vibration beneath the floor stuttered. The walls shuddered. For the first time, the road hesitated. Margaret stared at Evan, all flickering across her face. No one's ever threatened it with exposure, she whispered. Silence is its shield. Outside, far away, the faintest hint of gray touched the sky. Not dawn, but warning. The road had collected confessions for decades, and for the first time, someone was preparing to take them back. The road did not like being challenged. Evan felt that truth the moment he stepped outside. The fog had thickened into something almost architectural. Walls of pale gray rising on either side of Route G17, swallowing the trees, the sky, the distance. The air hummed faintly, like tension stretched too tight. Margaret stood beside him on the porch, arms crossed, her eyes scanning the road as if it might move on its own. It's reacting, she said. That means it's afraid. Roads can't be afraid, Evan replied. Margaret looked at him. Neither can maps, she said. And yet, the place that should have been there. They walked together, following the asphalt away from the house. Evan's footsteps felt heavier now, as if the road were resisting him, not blocking, just discouraging. After a few minutes, the fog thinned, and the world opened up. Evan stopped cold. A town lay ahead. Not ruins. Not overgrowth. A town. Main Street. Storefronts with intact windows. Street lights glowing dim amber. It looked paused mid-breath, midlife. No people. No movement. No sound. This isn't possible, Evan whispered. This isn't on any map. Margaret's face was pale. It used to be, she said. Welcome to Marrow's Edge. A wooden sign stood at the town's entrance. The paint was peeling, but the letters were legible. Welcome to Marrow's Edge. Population, 1,102. Below it, carved deep into the wood long after the sign had been erected. Temporary detour. Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. How long has it been a detour? He asked. Margaret didn't answer. The stillness. They walked down Main Street. A diner stood on the corner, its neon sign flickering faintly, open. Inside, tables were set. Coffee cups half full, long since evaporated. A newspaper lay folded on the counter. The date made Evan's stomach drop. October 14th, 1979. This place didn't decay, Evan said. It stopped. Margaret nodded. The road doesn't like loose ends, she said. It keeps things preserved. The first crack in history. Evan pulled out his phone again. No signal. But the camera worked now. He snapped a photo of the street. The screen displayed nothing. Just fog. You see it, Margaret said quietly. But the world doesn't. The reason the town died. They reached the town square. At its center stood a stone monument. Names were carved into it. Too many. Row after row after row. Evan stepped closer. Dates ranged from the early 1900s to the late 1970s. Most causes of death were the same. Industrial accident. Environmental exposure. Undetermined. Margaret swallowed. This was a mining town, she said. Coal at first. Then chemical processing. Evan's chest tightened. They poisoned the land, he said. Yes, Margaret replied. And the people. The decision that erased the town. Margaret led Evan into the old municipal building. Dust coated everything, but it was undisturbed. Files lined the walls. Boxes stacked neatly, labeled and dated. This is where it happened, Margaret said. She pulled one box free and opened it. Inside were memos. Letters. Meeting notes. All stamped with government seals. One phrase repeated over and over. Relocation not feasible. Public disclosure risk high. Recommend route alteration. They didn't evacuate, Evan said slowly. No, Margaret replied. They rerouted. The birth of Route G17. Evan flipped through the documents. Plans showed a highway extension, Route G17, cutting directly through Marrow's Edge. Officially, it was to improve regional access. Unofficially, they paved over it, Evan whispered. Margaret nodded. They diverted traffic through the town, she said. Let exposure look like coincidence. Let accidents scatter blame. And when people started noticing, the road learned how to hide, she said. The people who couldn't leave. Evan stared at a relocation report. Only 312 residents had accepted buyouts. The rest. They stayed, Evan said. Because it was home, Margaret replied. Because they were told it was safe. Because leaving would mean admitting they'd been lied to their entire lives. The road pulsed faintly beneath their feet. Listening. The day the town vanished. Margaret turned to another file. October 14th, 1979. A containment failure. A chemical plume released overnight. Emergency crews arrived at dawn. But the town. Gone, Evans said. Margaret nodded. The road folded, she said. Wrapped around it. Took the town off the map. The ones who walked out. People still wander in, Margaret continued. Travelers. Surveyors. Truckers. Evan felt sick. They become replacements, he said. Not replacements, Margaret corrected. Additions. The diner again. Evan returned to the diner. This time he noticed something new. A bulletin board behind the counter. Missing person flyers. Different decades. Different states. All pinned in careful rows. At the center was a single, older photo. A man with familiar eyes. Evan's father. His knees buckled. Margaret caught him before he fell. He helped us catalog, she said softly. He didn't want anyone forgotten. The truth about anchors. Evan wiped his eyes. Anchors don't just listen, do they? He asked. Margaret shook her head. They stabilize, she said. They keep the road from expanding. And if there aren't enough? Margaret looked toward the edge of town, where the fog thickened unnaturally. It grows, she said. Finds new detours. The map that lied. Evan understood now. The map wasn't wrong. It was edited. Every erased town. Every redirected road. Every missing mile marker. All symptoms of the same solution. Bury the problem. Drive people over it. Let silence do the rest. The choice Evan didn't ask for. You said you wanted to expose it, Margaret said. Do you still? Evan looked around at Marrow's Edge, frozen, abandoned, full of lives paused mid-sentence. Yes, he said, but not by leaving it to rot. Margaret studied him. You'd have to bring it back, she said. Onto the map. Evan nodded. Which means, she continued, the road will fight you. The sound of dawn. A low horn echoed faintly in the distance. Not mechanical. Organic. The town lights flickered. Margaret stiffened. Sunrise is close, she said, and the road doesn't want you knowing this place exists. Evan stared at the welcome sign again. Temporary detour. It wasn't a warning. It was a lie that had outlived the truth. Marrow's Edge wasn't lost. It was hidden. And Route G17 wasn't a road. It was a cover-up you could drive on. The road did not sleep. It only pretended to. As dawn crept closer, Evan felt it in his bones, the subtle tightening of the air, the way Marrow's Edge seemed to draw inward like a held breath. The fog along the outskirts thickened, reshaping itself into barriers that hadn't been there minutes earlier. Margaret stood beside him at the edge of the town square, her face set with the expression of someone who had watched this happen too many times. They're coming, she said. Who? Evan asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pointed down Main Street. A pair of headlights had appeared at the far end of town. The first car. The vehicle moved slowly, deliberately, as if the driver knew exactly where every crack in the pavement lay. It stopped in front of the municipal building. The engine cut. A man stepped out. Mid-50s. Well-groomed. Government issue calm. He adjusted his jacket, glanced around Marrow's Edge without surprise, and then looked directly at Evan. Good morning, the man said pleasantly. You're early. Evan's heart hammered. You know me, he asked. The man smiled. I know of you, Margaret muttered under her breath. I was hoping it wouldn't be him. The department that doesn't exist. The man approached, extending a hand. Calvin Reed, he said. Department of Infrastructure Continuity. Evan stared at the offered hand. That department doesn't exist, Evan said. Calvin chuckled softly. Not officially, he replied. That's the point. Margaret crossed her arms. You're not supposed to be here yet. Calvin glanced at the sky. Sunrise is flexible on Route G17, he said. You of all people know that. The maintainers. More headlights appeared behind him. 3 vehicles this time. Unmarked. Identical. They parked neatly along the curb, engines idling. Men and women stepped out, each carrying clipboards, cameras, and sealed document cases. No weapons. No uniforms. Just efficiency. Evan felt a chill. These are the people who keep the road open, Margaret whispered. The ones who make sure the detour stays temporary forever. The agreement no one read. Calvin gestured toward the municipal building. Shall we? He asked. This conversation is easier indoors. Inside, the building lights flickered on automatically. Dustless. Maintained. As if someone had been here yesterday. Calvin laid out documents across a long table. Maps. Updated ones. On them, Marrow's Edge was nothing but a green smudge labeled unincorporated land. You see, Calvin said, tapping the map, places don't disappear on their own. They require cooperation. Evan clenched his fists. You erased the town, he said. Calvin raised an eyebrow. We reclassified a liability. The logic of erasure. Margaret slammed her palm on the table. People died, she snapped. Yes, Calvin replied evenly. And more would have if we hadn't acted. Evan stared at him in disbelief. You poisoned them, Evan said. Then hid the evidence. Calvin shook his head gently. We inherited a problem, he said. One created by corporations that no longer exist and policies written by people long dead. So you paved over it, Evan said. And kept traffic flowing, Calvin replied. Which is ultimately the government's job. The road as a solution. Calvin turned to Evan. You think Route G17 is an accident, he said. It's not. It's a pressure valve. For what? Evan demanded. For accountability, Calvin said. For lawsuits that would cripple states. For panic that would spread faster than any chemical plume. Margaret laughed bitterly. So you feed people to it, she said. Calvin's expression didn't change. We redirect, he said. The road selects individuals already carrying risk factors. Evan's stomach turned. You mean grief, Evan said. Yes, Calvin replied calmly. Instability. Isolation. People unlikely to be missed immediately. Margaret went pale. The data they collect. Calvin opened a thin folder. Inside were printed analyses, charts, graphs, behavioral models. The road doesn't just erase, Calvin said. It teaches us. Teaches you what? Evan asked. How people break, Calvin replied. And how much pressure it takes. Evan felt sick. You're studying it, he whispered. Calvin nodded. And maintaining it. The anchor's real role. Margaret's voice trembled. The anchors keep it stable. Yes, Calvin agreed. But they're also sensors. Evan snapped his head up. Sensors, he repeated. Calvin met his gaze. They hear the confessions, he said. We read the patterns. Margaret staggered back as if struck. You told me it was to keep it contained, she whispered. It is, Calvin said. And to keep us informed. Evan's father. Evan's voice shook. My father didn't volunteer to be part of your data set. Calvin softened slightly. No, he said. He didn't. Calvin slid another document across the table. A photograph. Evan's father, older than Evan remembered him, sitting at the diner counter, writing in the ledger. He refused to hand over the full records, Calvin continued. He insisted the confessions belonged to the people who gave them. Margaret closed her eyes. That's why he stayed, Evan said. Yes, Calvin replied. And why he was inconvenient. The limit of control. Evan looked around the room. You don't actually control the road, he said. Calvin smiled thinly. No, he admitted. We manage it. And if it grows? Evan pressed. Calvin hesitated, just a fraction. Then we adjust, he said. Margaret scoffed. You mean you sacrifice more towns? Calvin didn't deny it. The offer. Calvin turned back to Evan. You have a choice, he said. You can leave at sunrise. Go home. Forget what you saw. Evan laughed humorlessly. And if I don't? Calvin leaned forward. Then we'll mark you as non-returned, he said. And the map will correct itself. The threat beneath the words. Evan felt the road stir beneath his feet, restless now. You're afraid, Evan said suddenly. Calvin blinked. Of what? He asked. Of the road being seen, Evan replied. Of it being named. Calvin's jaw tightened. Names give power, Calvin said. That's precisely why we avoid them. The second car. One of Calvin's colleagues entered quietly. Sir, she said, we're seeing instability at the perimeter. Calvin sighed. He's agitating it, he said, nodding at Evan. Margaret stepped closer to Evan. If you push this, she whispered, they'll bury it deeper. Evan shook his head. No, he said. They can't. The thing Calvin didn't know. Evan pulled out his phone. Still no signal. But the camera icon glowed steadily. I don't need the world to see it, Evan said. I need the road to hear me. Margaret stared at him. You can't confess at it, she whispered. It'll take you. Evan met her eyes. Only if I ask it to, he said. The first open declaration. Evan stepped outside into the square. Calvin followed, alarm creeping into his expression. What are you doing? Calvin demanded. Evan raised his voice, not shouting, but steady. This place exists, Evan said aloud. Marrow's Edge exists. The road shuddered. The fog rippled. The town lights flared brighter. Margaret gasped. You don't get to hide it anymore, Evan continued. Not from me. Not from the people who died here. The road responds. The asphalt cracked slightly beneath Evan's feet. Not breaking. Listening. Calvin backed away. Stop, he said sharply. You don't understand the consequences. Evan looked at him. I understand them perfectly, he said. You've been using silence as infrastructure. The line that changes everything. Evan took a breath and spoke the words that no one ever had. This road was built to lie. The vibrations surged violently. Documents fluttered out of Calvin's hands. The fog began to thin. And somewhere deep beneath Route G17, something old and burdened shifted. Not in hunger, but in recognition. The road answered without words. It answered with movement. The asphalt beneath Evan's feet rippled. Not like an earthquake, not like a collapse, but like a slow breath finally released. Streetlights along Marrow's Edge flickered in sequence, chasing each other down Main Street until the entire town glowed brighter than it had in decades. Calvin Reed staggered backward. "This isn't possible," he said. It doesn't do this." Margaret's hand tightened around Evan's sleeve. "You named it," she whispered. "You made it visible to itself." The lie loses its grip. Fog peeled away from the edges of the town, not lifting upward, but receding, as if pushed back by something asserting territory. Buildings sharpened. Colors deepened. The diner's neon sign flared fully to life. "Open." The sound that followed wasn't mechanical. It was human. Footsteps. Somewhere nearby. Then another. And another. Evan's pulse thundered in his ears. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Calvin shook his head sharply. "There's no one here." But he was wrong. The people who never left. Figures began to emerge from doorways, from alleys, from behind counters and windows. Men and women in outdated clothing, their faces pale but present. Not ghosts, no transparency, no glow, but solid, confused, frightened. Alive in the only way the road had allowed. Margaret gasped. "Oh God," she whispered. "It's letting them surface." A woman stepped into the street, clutching a child's hand. A man in a miner's jacket stared at his surroundings like he was waking from anesthesia. "What day is it?" someone called out. Calvin's composure finally broke. "This is catastrophic," he muttered. "This violates containment protocols." The road's voice. Evan felt it then. Not a sound. A pressure behind his thoughts, structured, deliberate. "You named the lie," it said, without language. "So the lie loosens." Evan swayed. Margaret grabbed him. "It's speaking to you," she said, terrified. "Anchors hear it like this." "I'm not an anchor," Evan said through clenched teeth. "Not yet," the road replied. The confessions escape. The air filled with whispers, not chaotic, not overlapping, but ordering themselves. Regrets spoken aloud for the first time. Apologies never delivered. Truths locked away for decades. The confessions weren't sinking anymore. They were rising. Calvin's team scrambled, shouting into radios that produced nothing but static. "Signal's dead," one of them yelled. "All systems down." Margaret laughed weakly. "The road doesn't like being managed," she said. "Only understood." The secret Calvin kept. Calvin turned to Evan, fury and fear warring on his face. "You think this is justice?" he snapped. "You think you're freeing them?" Evan met his gaze. "I think you're afraid of what happens when people remember," Evan said. Calvin barked out a bitter laugh. "You have no idea what remembering costs," he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were photos. More towns. More rerouted highways. More erased places. "This isn't the only Marrow's Edge," Calvin said. "There are dozens." Margaret went still. "You built more," she whispered. Calvin's voice cracked for the first time. "We had to," he said. "Once you hide one, the system learns the trick." The moment of reversal. The ground shuddered again, harder this time. A crack split the road directly down the center of Main Street, revealing not earth beneath, but layers. Pavement. Concrete. Older stone. Then something darker, etched with names. Thousands of them. Evan dropped to his knees. "This is where it kept them," he whispered. "No," the road answered. "This is where they kept themselves." The father's voice. Then Evan heard it. Not imagined. Not memory. "Evan." He turned. The man standing a few feet away looked older than the last photograph, but unmistakable. His father. Not young. Not restored. But present. Evan's breath broke. "Dad." His father smiled sadly. "I was hoping you wouldn't have to see this," he said. Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth. "You let him out," she whispered. "No," Evan said softly. "He let himself out. The anchor breaks." Evan's father looked at Calvin. "You told them silence was mercy," he said calmly. "But it was convenience." Calvin looked away. "You stayed to keep it from spreading," Calvin said. "You know that." Evan's father nodded. "And now someone else is doing that job," he said, looking at Evan. The road pulsed violently. "He has heard," it said. Therefore he is marked. Evan felt the weight slam into him. Grief, memory, obligation. No, Evan said aloud. I won't replace you. His father stepped closer. You won't, he said gently. You'll finish what I couldn't. The collapse of authority. Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time. Not from the road. From outside it. The fog tore apart at the edges as dawn finally breached the horizon. The map was failing. Calvin stared at his phone as notifications flooded in. Jesus Christ, he whispered. The satellite feed, it's updating. Margaret laughed, breathless. It's putting itself back, she said. The town. The last defense. Calvin looked at Evan with desperation now. If this stays visible, he said, lawsuits will tear states apart. People will riot. Evan stood. Good, he said. They should. The road's pressure eased, just slightly. Truth is heavier than silence, it said. But it does not rot. The sunrise decision. As sunlight spilled fully over Marrow's edge, something fundamental changed. The road stopped pulling. The hum beneath the ground softened. The town breathed. Evan's father stepped back, his edges already blurring. I can't stay, he said. Evan shook his head. Don't go. His father smiled. You didn't lose me, he said. You inherited my courage. Then he was gone, not taken, not erased, released. The aftershock. Calvin collapsed into a chair in the square. It's over, he whispered. We've lost containment. Margaret looked at Evan. No, she said quietly. They've lost control. The road's final word of the day. Evan felt the last echo press into his chest. Not ownership, not demand. Recognition. You spoke, the road said. Now others must carry the sound. The asphalt stilled. The town remained. And for the first time since it was built, Route G17 did not feel hungry. Memory does not arrive gently. It arrives like a debt collector, quiet at first, then relentless. The first camera drone crossed into Marrow's edge just after sunrise. It hovered above Main Street for less than 12 seconds before its signal cut out mid-feed. The last transmitted image showing a town that was not supposed to exist. Brick storefronts, parked cars, people standing in the open like survivors of a shipwreck suddenly spotted by land. Within minutes, the world noticed. The ripple effect. By noon, every mapping service began issuing silent corrections. Roads redrew themselves. Satellite imagery refreshed. Blank spaces filled in. A town appeared where there had been none. Newsrooms flagged it as a glitch. Government agencies flagged it as a crisis. And people, ordinary people, flagged it as personal. Phones rang across the country. Sons calling mothers. Sisters calling brothers. Names that had been spoken only in the past tense suddenly answered. The survivors. Marrow's Edge had no celebration. No cheers. No relief. Only exhaustion. People sat on curbs and diner stools, staring into coffee cups as if they might vanish again if they looked away. A man named Harold Weaver stood outside the post office for 3 straight hours, holding a letter addressed to himself, dated 28 years earlier. A woman named Rosa Alvarez cried quietly at the bus stop, repeating the same sentence. They said my file was closed. Evan moved through them like a ghost, offering water, listening when spoken to, silent when not. Every face held the same question. Why us? The weight settles. Margaret found Evan at the edge of town, standing where the fog used to begin. It's spreading, she said. Fast. He nodded. He could feel it. Memory had mass. And now it was moving. They're not just remembering this place, Margaret continued. They're remembering why they stopped looking. Evan swallowed. That was worse. The first backlash. At 2:17 p.m., the governor's office issued a statement. At 2:19, it was deleted. At 2:24, a revised version appeared, claiming Marrow's Edge had always been listed under an alternate municipal designation. Margaret laughed when she read it. They're trying to rename a scar, she said. Calvin Reed sat nearby, hands cuffed loosely in front of him, not arrested, not free. Words buy time, he muttered. Time buys control. Evan looked at him. And what buys truth? Evan asked. Calvin didn't answer. The second wave. The remembering didn't stop at Marrow's Edge. That night, Evan dreamed of roads he had never driven. In his sleep, he heard names whispered with coordinates. Routes he could feel. When he woke, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages. Emails. Photos of roadside memorials people swore they didn't remember placing. Stories of towns passed through once and never found again. Margaret watched him pale. "It's not just memory," she said quietly. "It's recognition. The anchor's burden. You're becoming a reference point," she told him. "For what?" "For places that were told to forget themselves." Evan rubbed his temples. "I didn't agree to this." Margaret's voice softened. "No one ever does." She hesitated, then said what she'd been holding back. "The road marked you." Evan looked up sharply. "You said anchors were chosen to hold silence," he said. "Yes," she replied, "but sometimes silence fails." She met his eyes. Then the anchor becomes a speaker. The first lawsuit. 3 days after Marrow's Edge reappeared, the first wrongful disappearance suit was filed. Then another. Then 50 more. Families demanded explanations for years lost, deaths declared, properties seized. Governments stalled. Corporations deflected. Insurance companies panicked. And somewhere deep beneath the highways, something listened. Calvin's confession. That night, Calvin asked to speak to Evan alone. They sat in the empty diner, neon buzzing above them. "I was wrong," Calvin said without preamble. Evan waited. "We told ourselves we were preventing chaos," Calvin continued. "That a few erased places were better than a world that couldn't handle its own shadows." He looked up, eyes hollow. "But the truth is, we were afraid." "Of what?" Evan asked. Calvin exhaled shakily. "Of being remembered. The cost reveals itself." The next morning, the first town vanished back. Not Marrow's Edge. Another one. A small place in the desert, briefly visible on satellite feeds, briefly trending online, then gone again. Panic rippled through Marrow's Edge. Margaret stared at the screen, horrified. "It's collapsing under the weight," she said. "Some places can't hold the remembering yet." Evan felt sick. "So what happens to them?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. Then, they break. The road speaks again. That night, Evan walked the highway alone. The asphalt hummed softly beneath his feet. "Truth spreads unevenly," the road said. "Some ground is weak." "What do you want from me?" Evan asked aloud. The hum deepened. "Balance," it replied. "Not exposure. Not erasure." Evan clenched his fists. "You're asking me to choose," he said. "You already are." The moral fracture. Inside Marrow's Edge, people argued. Some wanted the attention, media, justice, accountability. Others wanted the road quiet again. "I don't want to disappear," Rosa Alvarez said, voice shaking. "But I don't want my children to lose another 20 years. Memory was no longer a gift. It was a weapon, and it cut both ways. The world pushes back. Federal vehicles lined the highway at dawn. Men and women in suits stepped out, calm smiles stretched thin. One of them approached Evan. "We'd like to offer protection," she said. "For who?" Evan asked. She didn't hesitate. "For the infrastructure." Margaret scoffed. "You mean the lie?" The woman's smile tightened. "Truth without control is just damage," she said. Evan shook his head. "No," he said. "Damage without truth is what put us here." The choice becomes clear. That night, Evan stood where his father had stood decades earlier. At the center of the road. He understood now. The cost of remembering wasn't chaos. It was responsibility. You couldn't unsee. You couldn't unknow. And you couldn't ask someone else to carry it for you. "Will you carry us?" The road asked, not pleading, not commanding. Evan closed his eyes. "No," he said softly. "We carry each other." The hum changed. Not louder. Clearer. The consequence. By morning, the world had split. Some places stabilized, reappearing fully, communities rebuilding openly. Others faded, too fragile to hold themselves yet. The road was no longer hiding them. It was waiting. The cost paid. Margaret stood beside Evan as the sun rose. "You know what this means," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "You won't get to disappear anymore," she said. "Not ever." Evan watched light spill across Marrow's Edge. "That's okay," he said. "Neither will they." The future did not announce itself with sirens or speeches. It arrived quietly, through updates, court filings, classroom questions, and a generation that refused to accept missing answers. By the time the world realized it could no longer look away, it was already too late to pretend nothing had changed. The moment history broke form. It started in a middle school in Ohio. A teacher pulled up a digital map to explain interstate commerce routes. A student raised her hand. Why does Route G17 go through a town my grandma says never existed? The room fell silent. The teacher laughed nervously, then checked the map. Marrow's Edge was there. Listed. Labeled. Footnoted. The lesson plan collapsed. The archives opened. Within weeks, historians began finding documents they did not remember cataloging. Photographs with dates that contradicted official timelines. Property deeds stamped void without explanation. Audio recordings labeled containment review. Journalists smelled blood in the water. Not the sensational kind. The slow, structural kind. The kind that eats institutions from the inside. Margaret stood in the Marrow's Edge library, now reopened, watching a team of volunteers scan old records. They can't put this back, she said. Evan nodded. They won't try, he replied. They'll try to outpace it. The generation that asked why. College students began posting side-by-side comparisons online. What the map said. What my family remembers. Hashtags formed. Not angry ones. Curious ones. Hashtag where did they go? Hashtag what was erased. Hashtag who decided. Governments issued reassurances. Young people issued spreadsheets. The future had found the thread. And it pulled. The first hearing. Evan was not subpoenaed. He was invited. The letter used careful language. Consultative appearance. Voluntary testimony. Margaret read it twice. They're afraid of you, she said. No, Evan replied. They're afraid of what happens if I don't show up. The room where denial died. The hearing room was clean, modern, and deeply unprepared. Officials asked rehearsed questions. Evan answered plainly. Yes, the town was erased. No, not by accident. Yes, people were declared dead who were alive. No, it was not necessary. The room shifted. A senator leaned forward. Are you suggesting, he said carefully, that infrastructure itself participated? Evan met his gaze. I'm suggesting it was taught, he said. Silence followed. Not disbelief. Recognition. The cost of seeing. Outside, protesters gathered, but they weren't uniform. Some demanded justice. Some demanded silence. Some begged for roads to stay quiet where their loved ones had vanished peacefully, without answers. A woman approached Evan as he left. My son disappeared near Flagstaff, she said. If the road knows. Evan closed his eyes briefly. It knows, he said. Her face crumpled. Then why hasn't it answered? Evan swallowed. Because some truths arrive only when we're ready to carry them. She nodded, not satisfied, but understanding. That was the future. Not comfort. Capacity. The road adapts. Back in Marrow's Edge, the hum beneath the asphalt changed again. Less hunger. More structure. Evan walked it nightly, not to listen, but to balance. He wasn't controlling it. He was translating weight. They're watching now, the road said. Watching changes things. Yes, Evan replied. It makes witnesses. The second failure. A city tried to bury its own erasure. Legal injunctions. Data blackouts. Emergency reroutes. The road responded by doing nothing. No collapse. No disappearance. Just refusal. Traffic backed up for miles. Commerce stalled. The mayor resigned within a week. Margaret smiled when she saw the footage. It's learning boundaries, she said. No, Evan replied. It's respecting them. The new language. Words changed. Missing no longer meant gone. Infrastructure no longer meant neutral. Children asked different questions. Who benefits? Who decides? Who disappears first? The future wasn't loud. It was precise. The personal cost. Evan couldn't go anywhere unnoticed now. People recognized him, not as a hero, but as a hinge. He received letters. Some grateful. Some furious. One simply read. My town came back. My husband didn't. Why him? Evan had no answer. He sat with the letter until dawn. Margaret's truth. You can't carry everyone, Margaret told him gently. I know, Evan said. But you keep trying. Yes, he admitted. Because someone once carried me. Margaret looked at him for a long time. That's how cycles break, she said. Not cleanly. Just differently. The future pushes. A global commission formed. Not to contain, but to listen. They called it absurd. Then they called it necessary. Engineers sat with anthropologists. Urban planners sat with grieving families. For the first time, roads were treated as memory-bearing systems. Not alive. Not dead. Accountable. The road's limit. One night, Evan felt the hum falter. He knelt, hand on the pavement. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "They are asking too fast," it replied. "Some things cannot surface without tearing." "Then slow down," Evan said. "They will not wait." Evan exhaled. "Then we teach them how." The future decides. A vote passed. Not unanimously, but enough. A global moratorium on infrastructural erasure. Temporary. Fragile. Historic. People cheered. Others panicked. Evan watched quietly. "This won't last," Margaret said. "No," Evan agreed. "But it's a start. The children know." A boy approached Evan in Marrow's Edge Park. "Are you the road man?" he asked. Evan smiled faintly. "I listened to it," he said. The boy nodded seriously. "My mom says the road remembers her sister," he said. Evan crouched. "Does that scare you?" The boy shook his head. "No," he said. "It means she's not gone." The future had already decided. The edge of control. That night, Evan stood at the town's boundary. The fog did not return. The road was quiet, but awake. "They cannot unsee now," it said. "Neither can you." Evan looked out at the open highway. "I won't look away," he said. The hum softened, approval, not possession. The future sets its price. Change demanded vigilance. Memory demanded care. Truth demanded people. Evan felt the weight settle, not crushing but permanent. The future didn't need him forever, just long enough to teach others how to stand where he stood. Silence does not retreat evenly. It clings to corners, sinks into foundations, and waits for exhaustion. The last place it hid was not on any map. It was between them, the anomaly that wouldn't stabilize. 3 weeks after the moratorium passed, the alerts began. Not from journalists, not from governments, from the road itself. Evan felt it before anyone called, an uneven pull in his chest, like gravity misfiring. "This one's different," he told Margaret. She looked at him over a stack of reports. "They all are." "No," Evan said. "This one is resisting. The place without coordinates." Data showed a void, no satellite failure, no blackout. Just a region that refused definition. Planes altered course unconsciously. GPS rerouted drivers away without explanation. No name surfaced. No missing persons list attached itself. It was a place that had succeeded too well. "They didn't just erase it," Margaret said quietly. "They erased the memory of erasing it." Evan felt cold. "That's the deepest silence," he said. "The one no one asks about." The road's hesitation. Evan knelt on the asphalt where the pull grew strongest. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. The hum stuttered. "This one was not taken," it replied. "It was given." Margaret stiffened. Given to who? The road waited longer than usual. To the idea that forgetting could be clean. The truth about consent. They traced it through old transportation contracts. Buried clauses. Emergency powers invoked during an unnamed crisis. A town that voted to be removed. No protests. No disappearances. No resistance. A collective decision to vanish. Margaret closed the file slowly. "They chose silence," she said. Evan's voice was barely audible. "Why?" "The reason people vanish. They found the answer in letters never sent. Diaries sealed in plastic. A virus. Not deadly enough to justify panic. Just stigmatizing enough to erase futures. The town became a solution. Not a crime scene. A containment of shame. They disappeared themselves," Margaret whispered, "so the world wouldn't have to decide how to treat them." Evan felt the road tremble. "They asked me to forget them," it said. I agreed. The moral impasse. Global leaders demanded action. "Bring it back," they said. "All of it." Evan refused. "You can't expose someone against their will," he said. "That's not justice. That's theft." Margaret nodded slowly. Memory without consent is just another kind of violence. The road went quiet, listening. The voices that remained. At night, Evan heard them. Not screams. Not pleas. Calm conversations. Laughter. Life continuing out of sight. "They're still there," he said. Margaret swallowed. "And alive." "Yes," Evan said. "And at peace." The pressure builds. The public disagreed. Petitions surged. Nothing should be hidden. Truth above all. Evan stood before cameras again. There is a difference, he said steadily, between uncovering harm and violating refuge. Some listened. Many didn't. The future was still learning limits. The road's oldest secret. The road spoke one final truth. I was not built to erase, it said. I was built to carry weight. Evan understood. Silence wasn't its design. Silence was a misuse taught by fear. This place had used it differently. As shelter. The decision only one could make. Evan stood at the threshold, the pull strongest here. If I name it, he said, it surfaces. Margaret said nothing. If I don't, he continued, it stays protected. The road waited. For the first time, it did not influence. Evan closed his eyes. I won't name you, he whispered. The pull eased. The consequence. The moratorium fractured. Critics accused Evan of hypocrisy. Supporters defended his restraint. Trust wavered, but the road remained stable. Balance held. The last place silence hid remained unseen. And chosen. The final reckoning. Evan returned to Marrow's edge changed. You gave up certainty, Margaret said. I gained boundaries, Evan replied. She smiled sadly. That's the hardest truth. The road's acceptance. You learn the difference, it said, between silence that harms and silence that heals. Evan placed his hand on the pavement. Thank you for waiting, he said. The hum softened, not approval. Respect. The last night before answers end. Evan dreamed of his father again. This time, his father said nothing. He simply stood at a crossroads and nodded. That was enough. When nothing is hidden, nothing is simple. Truth does not replace silence. It rearranges it. The morning after the last secret, the world did not end. That surprised everyone. Markets opened. Buses ran. Children went to school with questions their teachers were still learning how to answer. Marrow's edge woke under a sky that no longer felt provisional. The road lay still. Not asleep. Resting. The shape of a changed world. Maps updated permanently. Not with redactions. With footnotes. Entire sections labeled. Historically obscured settlements. Documentation ongoing. No erasures. No cover names. Just acknowledgement of absence and return. Margaret watched a new sign being installed at the edge of town. Marrow's Edge. Established, uncertain. Returned, documented. She smiled. That's honest, she said. Evan nodded. It leaves room. The road releases its grip. For the first time since his father disappeared, Evan slept through the night without hearing the hum. When he woke, he felt lighter. Not free of responsibility. Free of compulsion. He walked the highway at dawn and felt nothing. No pull. No weight. The road did not need him anymore. You taught them how to listen, it said softly. Now they must practice. Evan placed his palm on the pavement one last time. Take care of them, he said. They will take care of me, the road replied. Margaret's departure. Margaret packed slowly. No urgency. No escape. I'm going back to teaching, she said. Urban ethics. Memory systems. Evan smiled. Good luck convincing students that roads have opinions. She smirked. They already know institutions do. They stood at the bus stop. Stay, Evan said. Margaret shook her head. You don't need a translator anymore, she said. You need witnesses. She boarded the bus without looking back. That mattered. The new rituals. Marrow's Edge established a yearly gathering. Not a festival. A pause. People stood along the road at dusk and spoke names, some theirs, some borrowed. Not prayers. Acknowledgments. No one filmed it. The future respected boundaries now. Calvin's end. Calvin Reed testified voluntarily. Not for immunity. For closure. He described the system. The incentives. The fear. I believed I was minimizing harm, he said. But harm that is hidden grows teeth. He was sentenced. Lightly, some said. He accepted it without argument. I carried silence, he told Evan afterward. You taught me it was heavy because it was wrong. Evan said nothing. Some truths did not need response. The places that returned. Not all towns came back. Some chose not to. Some were still deciding. A registry formed, not of locations, but of consent. Places could opt in. Opt out. Be remembered quietly. Or loudly. Memory became collaborative. Messy. Human. The letter from the unnamed place. One morning, Evan received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single page. Thank you for not naming us. We are healing. When we are ready, we will speak ourselves. Evan folded it carefully. That was enough. The father's legacy. Evan visited the spot where his father had first anchored. There was no marker. Just open road. He stood there until sunset. I didn't replace you, Evan said aloud. I finished it. The wind answered, not the road. That was right. The future holds. Years passed. Children grew up knowing the map was not neutral. Engineers studied memory as a variable. Ethics became a required course. Not everyone liked it. That was okay. Truth had learned to coexist with disagreement. The road today. It still carries weight. But not alone. People notice when it hums. When it goes quiet. They ask why. They listen. That was the real change. Evan steps away. Evan moved to a small house outside Marrow's Edge. He taught part-time. Wrote rarely. When asked about the road, he said, "It remembers because we asked it to. Now we remember for ourselves." That answer aged well. On a clear night, Evan walked the highway one last time. No pull. No voice. Just asphalt cooling under stars. He realized then what remained when nothing was hidden. Not peace. Not certainty. But choice. The choice to see. The choice to speak. The choice to leave some things quiet. Not because they are buried, but because they are held. Evan turned back toward town. The road did not follow. The first story is over. Story 2. The voicemail was only 12 seconds long. No words. Just breathing. Slow. Intentional. Close to the microphone. It arrived at 2:41 a.m. on a phone that hadn't been connected to a network in over a year. The call that should not exist. Detective Mara Klein stared at the waveform on her laptop, the blue peaks and valleys repeating with almost hypnotic regularity. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Pause. Inhale. She'd replayed it 23 times already, each listen tightening something just behind her ribs. Phones don't do this, she muttered. The device sat on the desk between her and the evidence technician. A battered flip phone sealed in a clear bag, its screen spiderwebbed with old cracks, its battery long dead. Recovered from a burned-out farmhouse 3 counties west. No power source. No SIM card. No service. And yet, at 2:41 a.m., it had called her. The house on River County Road 12. The property wasn't supposed to be there. At least, not according to the most recent county maps. River County Road 12 ended in a cul-de-sac bordered by soy fields and scrub trees. Always had. The nearest structure was a collapsed barn half a mile away. But when the fire department responded to a 911 call that came from no registered address, they found a house. 2 stories. White siding blackened by fire. Front porch intact. Door open. As if it had been waiting. Inside, they found one body. Male. Mid-40s. No identification. No signs of struggle. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. But the coroner had written one note in the margin of the preliminary report that made Mara's jaw tighten every time she read it. Victim likely deceased before fire began. A name that didn't stick. They called him John Doe for paperwork. But Mara hated placeholders. She sat across from the body in the morgue earlier that night, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant sharp in her nose. His face was ordinary. Too ordinary. No distinguishing scars. No tattoos. Teeth in good condition. Hands clean, nails trimmed. Not a drifter. Not someone who fell through cracks. Someone who belonged somewhere. And yet, nothing. No missing persons match. No fingerprints on file. No DNA hit. It was as if the world had simply failed to remember him. The breathing returns. The voicemail played again. The technician shifted uncomfortably. "Detective," he said, lowering his voice. "You sure you want to keep listening to that?" Mara didn't look up. "Yes." He hesitated. "Because it's not just breathing." She paused the playback. "What do you mean?" He pointed to the waveform. "Listen to the spacing. It's too regular. Almost paced." Mara frowned and hit play again, this time counting silently. Inhale, 4 seconds. Pause, 2 seconds. Exhale, 4 seconds. Pause, 2 seconds. Like someone following instructions. Or rehearsing. The second message. At 3:06 a.m., her phone buzzed again. A text this time. From the same number. You answered faster than the others. Mara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. The others, she whispered. She typed back before she could stop herself. Who is this? The reply came instantly. The house. The fire that erased too cleanly. The arson report bothered her. Not because of what it found. Because of what it didn't. No accelerant residue. No faulty wiring. No lightning strikes. The fire had started in 3 separate rooms at once. Kitchen. Upstairs bedroom. Basement. Simultaneous ignition. As if the house itself had decided to burn. The fire chief had laughed it off. Old places go up weird, he'd said. But old places didn't erase themselves down to studs and ash while leaving the porch untouched. Old places didn't remove family photos from walls while leaving nail holes behind. Old places didn't wipe their own history. The first lie. Mara requested property records. The county clerk frowned at her screen. That address doesn't exist, she said. I was standing in it 6 hours ago, Mara replied. The clerk shrugged. Then it wasn't zoned. Or it was demolished years back. When? The clerk clicked, scrolled, paused. I don't know. That answer followed Mara all day. The neighbor who remembered too much. An hour before sunset, Mara found him. Earl Bennett, 78. Lived alone in a trailer near the soy fields. He didn't look surprised when she mentioned the house. He looked relieved. It called you too, didn't it? He asked. Mara froze. What? Earl nodded slowly. Different voice each time, he said. Sometimes crying. Sometimes quiet. Always from inside. Inside what? The house. Mara felt the air thicken. How long has it been calling people, Mr. Bennett? He stared past her, eyes unfocused. Since it realized it was empty. The name finally spoken. Who lived there? Mara asked. Earl swallowed. A family, he said. The Holloways. Mara's pulse spiked. She pulled out her tablet, typed quickly. Nothing. No Holloways listed in River County. No obituaries. No school records. No tax filings. Earl shook his head as if reading her thoughts. They stopped being recorded, he said. But they didn't stop existing. The child's room. Mara returned to the site just before nightfall. Fire tape fluttered in the wind. Ash crunched under her boots. She stepped carefully through the skeletal remains, flashlight cutting through shadow. Upstairs she found it. A child's bedroom. Mostly burned, but not completely. A section of wall remained untouched. On it, written in uneven crayon letters. Don't forget US. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Another text. You're standing where she slept. Mara's throat went dry. Who are you? She whispered aloud. The reply came slower this time. I'm what's left when no one answers. The house calls again. At exactly 2:41 a.m. the next night, the voicemail came again. This time there were words. Faint. Crackling. Urgent. Please, a child's voice whispered. Tell them we were here. Mara sat up in bed, heart hammering. Outside, somewhere in the dark, a phone rang, and no one living had dialed it. By morning, River County Road 12 no longer ended in a cul-de-sac. It bent. Not sharply. Not obviously. Just enough that if you weren't looking for it, you'd swear it always had. Detective Mara Klein noticed because she was looking for it, and because the road now felt longer than it had the night before. The first record that shouldn't exist. The county clerk's office opened at 8. Mara was there at 7:47, coffee untouched, jacket still smelling faintly of smoke. Property deeds, she said as soon as the clerk appeared. Archived. Pre-2000. The clerk, a woman named Denise who had worked there for 23 years, hesitated. We already checked. I know, Mara said. Check again. This time, don't search by address. Denise frowned. Then what? Mara slid a scrap of paper across the counter. Holloway. Denise typed. Paused. Typed again. Her expression changed, not confusion, but something closer to discomfort. That's odd, Denise said. What is? There is a Holloway, she said slowly. But the record's incomplete. Mara leaned forward. In what way? Denise turned the screen slightly. A property deed appeared, grainy scan, yellowed edges. Owner, Samuel Holloway. Spouse, Elena Holloway. Children, 1 minor. No address. No parcel number. No tax district. The margins where those fields should have been were blank, as if the information had been removed, not lost. Print it, Mara said. Denise hesitated. Detective, this file was accessed last night. Mara's stomach tightened. By who? Denise checked the access log. No one. The family without footprints. Mara spent the next 6 hours chasing ghosts. School records, none. Medical records, sealed but present, with no associated provider. Utility hookups, missing entirely. It was as if the Holloways had lived parallel to the system. Not off-grid, between grids. The most unsettling detail came from a census cross-check. In the 2010 census, River County showed a discrepancy. 1 household counted. 0 households listed. The margin note read, resolved. Resolved by whom? And how? The neighbors who remembered wrong. Mara returned to River County Road 12 just after noon. More people were there now. Not reporters, locals. They stood at the fire tape, murmuring. She recognized one face from the night before. A woman in her late 30s, arms folded tightly across her chest. Did you know them? Mara asked gently. The woman shook her head. No, she said, then paused. I don't think so. Mara waited. My son used to talk about a girl, the woman continued. Said she waved at him from a porch when he walked to the bus stop. Mara felt a chill. Did you ever see her? The woman swallowed. I remember telling him to stop making up friends. Mara looked toward the remains of the porch. Intact. Waiting. The house speaks again. At 1:13 p.m., Mara's phone vibrated. You found the paper. She didn't reply. They didn't take us all at once, the message continued. They took us piece by piece. Mara typed back despite herself. Who took you? The dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. The people who said it was for our own good. The fire chief's silence. Fire Chief Randall Pierce had been with the department for 32 years. When Mara asked to see him, he didn't look surprised. I figured you'd be back, he said, closing his office door. She placed the Holloway deed on his desk. Do you recognize this name? He didn't look at it. Yes. Mara's jaw tightened. You want to tell me why no missing persons report was ever filed? Randall exhaled slowly. Because no one was allowed to, he said. Mara stiffened. Allowed by who? Randall finally met her eyes. By the county. The meeting that never happened. Randall told her about a meeting in 2014. Closed door. Select officials. No minutes taken. They said the Holloways were a liability, he said. To what? Mara asked. Randall hesitated. To the narrative. Mara felt a flare of anger. Whose narrative? Economic, he said. Environmental. Political. Pick one. He rubbed his hands together. There was contamination nearby. Not lethal, but ugly. Lawsuits ugly. So they erased a family? Mara snapped. No, Randall said quietly. They erased a location. The family just happened to be standing on it. The child who called first. Mara returned to the site at dusk. The sky bled orange and purple across the fields. She stood where the child's bedroom had been. Her phone rang. This time she answered. Mara, she said. There was a pause. Then, you said my name wrong. Her breath caught. I'm sorry, Mara whispered. What's your name? Lila, the voice said. Younger now. Clearer. You keep saying Holloway. That was my dad's name. Mara swallowed. And your name? I just told you. The rule of remembering. Lila, Mara said softly. Why are you calling me? Because you listen, Lila replied. And because the house can't hold us much longer. Mara's pulse spiked. What happens if it doesn't? We fade, Lila said. Not die. Worse. Mara closed her eyes. Tell me what you need. There was a long pause. Say us out loud, Lila said. Where people can hear. The first name spoken. That night, Mara filed a supplemental report. She broke protocol. She wrote names. Samuel Holloway. Elena Holloway. Lila Holloway. She described the house. The fire. The erased records. She submitted it publicly. Not sealed. Not redacted. When she hit send, her phone buzzed once. Thank you. The hum in the air around the site softened, as if something had exhaled. The consequence. By morning, The report had been flagged, then copied, then removed, then reposted by someone else. Screenshots spread, journalists called, county officials denied, but the name Lila Holloway began appearing in places it hadn't before. Comments, threads, questions. Memory had found traction. The house makes its demand. At 2:41 a.m., the phone rang again. Lila's voice was calm now. "You started it," she said. "Now you have to finish." Mara sat up in bed. "How?" "Bring them here," Lila said. "Who?" "The ones who signed the papers." Mara stared into the dark. "Why?" "So the house can tell them what they forgot." The signatures came first. Before the fire. Before the silence. Before the house learned how to call. The document that wouldn't stay filed. Mara found it buried 3 layers deep in the county's internal archive, misdated, mislabeled, and misfiled under environmental variance requests. A single PDF. 9 pages. No letterhead. No official title. Just a bold line at the top. Special Land Use Resolution, RCR 12. River County Road 12. Her pulse ticked faster as she scrolled. The language was deliberately bland. Temporary relocation. Public safety considerations. Voluntary compliance. But beneath the euphemisms lay the truth. Occupants of the designated structure agree to immediate vacatur of premises pending remediation. Failure to comply may result in forcible displacement. Mara's jaw clenched. "They didn't relocate them," she whispered. "They erased them." The names behind the pen. At the bottom of the document were 6 signatures. County Commissioner, Zoning Director, Environmental Consultant, Public Safety Liaison, Legal Counsel, and one unfamiliar title. Community Risk Coordinator. Mara leaned back in her chair. "That's not a real position," she muttered. She searched the name attached to it. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No licensing board. No payroll record. The signature looked wrong. Too neat. Too practiced. As if it had been written many times before. The first call from the house. Her phone buzzed. "You found them." Mara didn't reply. "They promised it wouldn't hurt," the house continued. "They promised it would be quiet." Mara typed back. "Why did you sign?" The response came slowly. "My parents did. I didn't know it was goodbye." Mara closed her eyes. "Lila," she whispered aloud. "Did they force you out?" "No," the house replied. "They made us agree. The meeting no one remembers attending." Mara requested the minutes from the so-called resolution meeting. The clerk sent her a blank document. Time stamp. Room number. Attendees listed. No content. As if someone had pressed save before typing a word. She drove to the county building anyway. The conference room still existed. 3rd floor. Windowless. Smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner. Mara sat at the long table and imagined the Holloway's future being negotiated without them present. Her phone vibrated once. "They sat where you're sitting," the house texted. The first signature speaks. The environmental consultant was easiest to find. Retired. Living in a lake house 2 hours north. Mara knocked at 9:12 a.m. He opened the door wearing slippers and a look of mild irritation. "Yes," he said. She held up her badge. "Detective Mara Klein. I need to ask you about River County Road 12. His irritation evaporated. "I don't discuss closed projects," he said immediately. Mara nodded. "Then you remember it." He hesitated. "I remember nothing about it," he said. Behind him, a framed certificate hung crooked on the wall. The same year as the resolution. Mara pointed. "You got an award that year." He followed her gaze. "I don't recall why." His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "I didn't give you my number," Mara said quietly. He swallowed. Neither had she. The smell of smoke without fire. Inside the consultant's home, the air thickened. Not with heat. With memory. He rubbed his temples. "I thought it was just a bad dream," he murmured. A little girl asking why she couldn't bring her drawings. Mara's heart pounded. "What drawings?" He looked at her sharply. "She said they'd burn. The paper remembers." Mara placed the printed resolution on the consultant's kitchen table. As he looked at it, the paper darkened, letters bleeding slightly, as if ink were melting. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I didn't do anything," Mara said. The paper curled at the edges. A faint scorch mark appeared over his signature. The house texted. It knows your hand. The consultant staggered back. I didn't light the fire, he cried. I just signed. The paper blackened fully, then went still. Mara gathered it carefully. The signature was gone, burned clean through. The pattern emerges. The next 3 signatories reacted the same way. Denial, discomfort, then memory. Each time Mara placed the document before them, the paper reacted. Ink blistered, margins charred, signatures vanished. The house did not scream. It did not rage. It corrected. By the 4th interview, word spread. 2 signatories refused to meet her. 1 lawyer resigned publicly, citing unresolved ethical distress. Another disappeared entirely. The coordinator, who never existed. Only 1 name remained. The community risk coordinator. No address. No office. No record of employment. But the signature remained untouched. Mara stared at it late into the night. Why didn't you burn that one? She asked the house. The reply came after a long pause. Because he didn't forget. Mara's skin prickled. Who is he? The typing dots blinked. Stopped. Blinked again. He's coming back. The house grows louder. As signatures vanished, the house changed. Neighbors reported sounds at night. Footsteps. Doors opening and closing. Laughter. The fire-damaged frame seemed fuller. As if absence were reversing. County officials issued statements blaming stress hallucinations. But Mara knew better. They're remembering too slowly, she told her captain. We need to shut this down, he replied. She shook her head. It already started. The last signatory arrives. He showed up unannounced. Tall, gray-haired, expensive coat. He walked into the station lobby like he belonged there. I'm here about the house, he said. Mara felt the air tighten. You're the coordinator, she said. He smiled thinly. I was, he replied, before the title stopped existing. The truth he kept. They sat across from each other in interview room B. No recording, he said. It won't work anyway. Mara didn't argue. You told them it was temporary, she said. Yes. You knew it wouldn't be. He nodded. You call it erasure, he said. I called it containment. Mara leaned forward. A family died. He met her gaze. They lived longer than they would have otherwise, he said quietly. Mara's blood ran cold. You let the house burn. He shook his head. No, he said. I let it remember. The house interrupts. The lights flickered. The smell of smoke crept in. Mara's phone buzzed. He was there when it started. She looked up sharply. You were at the fire, she said. He smiled sadly. Someone had to make sure it finished. The walls creaked. The room temperature dropped. The man's smile faltered. The papers finally burned. Mara placed the resolution on the table between them. For the first time, the paper ignited completely. No flame, just heat. The coordinator screamed as his signature blackened, not erased, but etched deeper. The house texted one final line. You don't get to leave until we're named. The man slumped forward, sobbing. I remember them, he gasped. All of them. Mara stood. That's the point. The missing persons report was 4 pages long. It should have been 1. The report that broke the system. Detective Mara Klein filed it at 6:02 a.m., hands steady, jaw tight. Missing persons. Samuel Holloway, adult male. Elena Holloway, adult female. Lila Holloway, minor. Last seen. River County Road 12. Date, uncertain. Circumstances. Erasure of residents and records through coordinated county action. The system rejected it instantly. Error, date required. Mara typed a date. Rejected. She typed another. Rejected. She removed the field entirely. The cursor blinked. Then, against every rule built into the software, the system accepted it. The case number generated itself. The moment the world